Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast, your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. Season 2, Episode 4, Kings and Queens, and Vladimir Putin. And I believe that I have put my finger on, if not been directed to, the source of my discomfort, of my uneasiness, with my own presentation of this very podcast in Season 1, the concept of dysregulation. We will explore that, using the backdrop of one of my favorite movies, Tommy Boy. Once again, I thank you for listening. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and give this a thumbs up or 5 stars or whatever the ranking system is on your podcast platform of choice. Please write a review, create the hashtags, retweet, do whatever it is that the kids do to promote. As you are likely aware from every other social media platform that you have seen or are a part of or follow, it does help to get this type of input from listeners. Without further ado.
Act 1. Do we want an autocrat too?
Although no one thought that they really would, Russia invades Ukraine. Putin basically gives his middle finger to the world, and in a very candid speech leading up to the invasion, Putin sets forth his real vision for the future of Russia. He's not going back to the Soviet Union. He's going back to the Tsars. He's going back to the Romanovs. I didn't think I'd hear it, but Putin basically calling out Lenin and Trotsky for being bitches, giving away Poland and Ukraine and the Baltic states in the armistice between Russia and the Axis powers in 1917, Putin lays it out. Let's go back to kings and queens. And there's a lot of people out there that support it, particularly in this country. They've got so much incongruent thought. They have so many conflicting feelings. You go up to any American and you ask them whether or not they want to go back to kings and queens, they'll scoff, they'll laugh in your face, they'll get angry. Take a moment, pause, breathe. Ask them about the actions of autocrats around the world. They'll beat their chest. They get all swole. They get all bold. And they want to talk about how, if things were done like that in this country, in the United States, well, this would be the ideal country. Everything would be better. This continued polarization is troubling, on the left and on the right, because it all leads to the same place, whether or not you're decrying fascism or whether or not you're decrying communism. It all leads to the same place. It's autocracy. It is totalitarian rule by an autocrat. And that's what you have in Vladimir Putin. That so many people in this country celebrate as much is a testament to our collective ignorance, the failure of our schools to actually teach, to instill in each of us the rationale as to why our government operates the way it does. And let me sum it up for you. And it should be summed up in this way to 6, 7, 8-year-old children. Fuck the king. Fuck the king. Kick the British out of America. Everybody comes together. How are we going to do this? And the real consensus was around, we're not going to do a king. This whole thing about they gave George Washington the opportunity to become king, and he turned it down. That's not exactly true. Let's go over the story very quickly, and then I'll give you my opinion as to why I think that rumor, if you will, that urban legend was promoted even in schools, even in institutions of higher learning. Basically what happened was nobody was getting paid in the Continental Army. That's pretty well known. And if it's not well known, again, testament to the failure of our schools, testament to our institutions of higher learning. Not good at what they do. The Continental Army was not getting paid. Washington gets a letter from a guy, I believe he's not a general, he's a colonel. He's high up in the military, but he's basically saying to Washington in a letter, look, you're going to have a mutiny within your ranks if we don't eventually get paid. And one way that we could actually get paid is if you, George Washington, were bestowed the moniker, the title, the authority of a king. Not only would it have material advantages for you, it would certainly allow you the authority to pay the army because we can't get this Continental Congress to do as much. This was one letter from one guy. Washington, of course, rejects that and says it's asinine to think that he would even posture, that he would even solicit or promote or politic that he become king. We have a revisionist history of our founding fathers that suits a lot of different moneyed interests. There is money in Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and James Madison and Benjamin Franklin being the people that we've been taught that they were. This is a good example of that. Washington is magnanimous and he is always putting the interest of other people first. His soldiers, his state, his family. Here, we can spin this yarn about how Washington was at one time offered the opportunity to be king. Now, why do I bring this up? It's very, very important that we understand history because it gives us examples of how the world actually operates. History wakes us up from our dream, our fantasy of how the world actually operates. We want to remain in our waking dream. We do not want to wake up, and we do not want to realize that our fantasies are never going to be realized, and one of the easiest ways to do it is to reject the lessons of history. So what is happening in this dynamic between a soldier and a general, the general being the general of the entire army? This soldier is going to the general and saying, isn't this whole democracy thing, the military being separated from the civilian authority being made up of this collective body having to garner enough support through votes in order to pay us? Isn't this a bunch of fucking bullshit? Here we are fighting for the very survival of this nation, fighting for the survival of the very body that won't pay us. Isn't this fucking bullshit? Let's cut through it all. Let's get some autocracy going. Where's that totalitarian? Where is that autocratic? Where is that heavy hand that can come in and with one stroke of the pen get us paid? That is the paradox of government. If you want to get things done and get them done quickly, and very often efficiently, you need some totalitarianism. You need an autocrat. You need a king. You need a queen. Power cannot be diffused. And that way, things can get accomplished. Why do we not embrace as much? The answer is simple. You don't get to elect kings and queens. They are very often appointed through what? Lineage. It's just the son, it's just the daughter of the person that was king or queen before them. And what do we see over the course of time? This body of history that we have? Most kings and queens are fucking selfish idiots. They are spoiled. They act in their own self-interest and not in the interests of their country or their people. They can't be trusted. And they very often lead the people to ruin. In this country, the United States of America, We looked at the options and we said, we'd rather have a convoluted, inefficient, bickering, twisted amalgamation of clusterfuck than we would one more king or queen. One more is one too many. And I believe that since then, you've had a significant portion of the population in this country lament as much. This is a strange part of our human condition. People gravitate to, they are enamored by, they find love and affection in kings and queens, in monarchy, in autocrats. We, as a species, have this strange desire to be ruled, to have everything taken care of for us. Whether it be a religious institution, whether it be the institution that purports to represent God, whether it be a governmental institution, an institution that purports to represent the nation or the people. We want someone to come in and take care of all the problems. God doesn't work that way. Went over it pretty clearly in episode 2 of this very podcast, this season. God doesn't operate that way. And as we continue to find out, because we continue to make the same errors, the government certainly doesn't work that way. What we're going through right now is a collective insanity. We refuse to do anything different. We do the same things over and over again, and we expect a different result. We're not going to get what we want with our levels of participation in democracy in the 21st century. Now, what do I mean by that? Our levels of participation in democracy are very often how many people attend their religious institution, their church, their mosque, their synagogue. It's a holiday place. You go there for the holidays. You go there a few times a year. From a spiritual aspect, that's not good enough. And from a political aspect, simply voting once or twice every year, every 2 years, every 4 years, it's not good enough. Particularly if you can't vote outside of a party. Particularly if you can't vote outside of an issue. Now, I am using my words here very carefully. I'm not saying us. I'm saying you. I have challenged myself, particularly over the course of the last 6 years, looking at the way I voted, that I saw issues. Am I a single issue voter? Am I a party voter? Let's do the party voter first. It's the easiest. You can't vote for a Democrat if you call yourself a Republican. You can't vote for a Republican if you call yourself a Democrat. If you vote R or D up and down a ticket, you are part of the problem. What's a single issue voter? It's pretty easy. It's in the title, and a lot of people don't think that they are, but the fact of the matter is, they are. If you won't vote for someone, if they are for abortion, you are a single issue voter. If you won't vote for someone because they are pro-gun or pro-Second Amendment, you are a single issue voter. This is the way we vote. The politicians know it. The pundits know it. The media knows it. All of these sycophants that make all this money in these election cycles, they know it. It's R or D, and there's only a few issues out there that decide elections. Are you against abortion or are you for abortion? If you come out and say one or the other in a certain district, you are kissing a number of votes goodbye. And you're also welcoming a number of votes. It's a very simple calculation. Now I can go back to we. If we, dear listener, if we can't vote in any more sophisticated a fashion than that, nothing's going to change. I have said it for years. I have professed as much on this podcast. We need to start turning politicians over, no matter what their term is. If you're in the House of Representatives and you have this kind of stalemate, you have this kind of inertia that we're experiencing now, I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, I don't care what district you come from. The people in those districts have to turn that politician over. If you are a senator, you have 6 years. You have a long time to stay in office. But we need to turn over every one of them at every opportunity. And certainly, we should not have a two-term president for decades. For decades. If this is the level of inertia that we have in the federal government. That's how we solve the problem. Every election cycle, you have one party that comes out and proclaims themselves victorious. And the fact of the matter is, it's very likely that all that happened was people voted against different politicians, different policies, different parties, versus actually voting for any politician. So there's no real lesson to be gleaned, but no one's going to make any money off of there not being a lesson to be gleaned. So you have all the pundits, you have all the sycophants, you have all the people in the media, you have the politicians themselves. Oh, there's plenty to be said about any different election cycle, and the American people have spoken. What have the American people said? We are that stalemate. We are that inertia. We are so lazy. We are so incapable of addressing any problems. We are so incapable of getting outside of our prejudices, of our echo chambers, of our deep-seated religious or social or political beliefs. We are the inertia. We can't get out of this cycle that we're in, and we need somebody to take care of us. The last place that you're going to find that solitude is in government. To break that inertia, I had to vote for a Democrat. I voted for both Mark Kelly and Kristen Sinema in the senatorial elections here in Arizona. Now, to be clear, both Mark Kelly and Kristen Sinema, being Democrats from the state of Arizona, are akin to being Republicans in the state of New York or Massachusetts or California in the 1960s. That's just how far right the Republican Party has gone. At least many elements within the Republican Party has gone. But yes, I went across the aisle, so to speak, and I voted for Democrats. And I didn't vote for Democrats because I thought that they were the best candidate. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm starting to turn them over. I don't have any reservation about voting for a Republican in the next senatorial election. I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for. They've got some real fine nut jobs coming up through the woodwork to run in the Republican primary here in the state. So not sure whether or not I'll be able to vote for a Republican, but certainly I'll do as much just to turn them over. We have to make our voices heard, and our voices are not heard by simply voting for one party or one issue. This type of mental inertia, this labyrinth, this place we find ourselves stuck in, we are creating it. And it is going to lead to such a high level of frustration that people, and when I say people, I mean a majority of the people, as I alluded to earlier, I think that there has always been a contingent of people in this country who've lamented the fact that we had a democratic government. But when that number becomes a majority, you're going to have the end of democracy. We can't make up our own minds to do what we need to do in order to make government work. So we're just going to break it and turn it back over to kings and queens. It's not the fault of the system. It is our fault. We pull the levers. We create the inputs. We witness, we experience the outputs. We have a whole body of history, world history. We have everything we could ever want to know on our phones. There isn't anything that's a mystery to us. And yet we are in this vibration of frustration and we won't move out of it. We want everything to be different and we're not going to do anything whatsoever to change what we do as individuals. We've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. Give it a try, dear listener. Go and look at the person that frankly disgusts you on that ballot. And for the sake of getting an incumbent out of office, vote for them. Look at an issue from the opposite side. Or, maybe even more poignantly, ignore it. Don't vote for any candidate based on that issue, whether it's guns or abortion, to get an incumbent out of office. Make the office the most unstable place that a politician can be, and the politician will start responding to the people versus responding to corporations and, for all intents and purposes, money. Look at Russia. Look at a guy like Putin. They had elections. Putin took power and basically gave himself a lifelong appointment. Is that what we want? Is that what we want to create? The atmosphere by which a tyrant can actually rise through the ranks. And one side saying, thank God the tyrant is here. The universe is achieving balance. And if the balance is complete and utter stalemate because we refuse to make decisions outside of R or D, Republican or Democrat, outside of abortion or guns, we have no one to blame but ourselves. I, too, admire Vladimir Putin for his honesty, and that's it. I'm not one of these Republicans with such weak will, with such weak mind, fawning over Vladimir Putin. But you have to admire his honesty. He's come right out and said it. I'm not going back to communism. I'm going back to kings and queens. Don't be fooled, dear listener. Anyone who has supported Vladimir Putin, anyone who is supporting Vladimir Putin, feels the exact same way. And they want to do that in the United States. They want the system to be turned on its head, the executive office to be given the power of an autocrat, of a king. And they want that power, of course, to be wielded by themselves. Who do you want to look at to break up that fantasy? That waking dream that is in fact a waking nightmare? Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Mussolini, Idi Amin, Pinochet. Hell, you could go back to Napoleon. You create that type of opportunity where one person can take power, and it is going to be the most ruthless, the most diabolical person. All these people beating their chest about that person's rise to power often end up in that person's crosshairs within the very near future after they've taken absolute power. There is no sharing. You wanted an autocrat, you got one, and generally, if you're in politics and you're trying to wield power, you're in the way. I have tried to look at it from below, not above. Look at it from a place of understanding and not condemnation and judgment. And I just don't get it. I don't get the fantasy. It's all an illusion. Monarchy, totalitarianism, autocracy, it's not liberating in its efficiency. It's a prison. Because you don't get to choose. For every one benevolent, kind, wise king, you've got 100 tyrants.
The King of England could just walk in here anytime he wants and start shoving you around. Do you want that? Huh? Do you?
No, Homer. No, I don't.
Act 2. I'm Joe the circus boy with his pretty new pet.
I can't watch cable news. I certainly can't watch any of the so-called pundits on cable news. Really just actors and actresses preaching from the bully pulpit to the converted, feeding McDonald's, Burger King, whatever pig slop, to the faithful. And yet, in my own podcast, after listening to many of the episodes that I did last season, as I've alluded to already, I didn't resonate with my own delivery, with my own presentation. And the reality is that my presentation often got into the same vibration as your Rachel Maddow, as your Tucker Carlson. What is this? What is this state that I'm wrestling with? Are you aware, dear listener, of the concept of dysregulation? Webster's defines it simply as an impairment of a physiological regulatory mechanism as that governing metabolism, immune response, or organ function. These are physical examples of dysregulation. We are also dysregulated emotionally. We allow thoughts in our heads to run amok. We often can't check ourselves. We're in fact in a state of sleep. We are in waking sleep, lost in a thought. That thought becomes so pervasive that it begins to dysregulate actual physical functions. So an emotional dysregulation based on a thought can begin to dysregulate physical parts of the body. Your heart, your blood vessels, your muscles, your teeth can clench, your brow can furrow. Our simplistic interpretation of this is passion. We often equate the emotional outbursts of, let's just say, a television pundit to that of someone who passionately believes in what they are saying. I routinely have confused in my life dysregulation for passion. And the prime example that I couldn't put my finger on, even starting this new season, even adopting a new position, a new way of looking at things, a new perspective. We're going to think greater than our environment. We're going to see and feel the lesson in life's paradoxes. But I couldn't put my finger on how I wasn't doing that last season. It's this concept of dysregulation. It's when I become passionate about a topic, I in fact am dysregulated. I am no longer thinking as clearly about that topic. I am no longer in this calm, collected, powerful state of being. Calm, collected vibration. Trying to communicate this information to you so that you can receive it in the same wavelength. Rather, I am like many the television, the cable news pundit, in a vibration of anger, of frustration, of dysregulation, and that is going to attract people who are just like that. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are in that state of dysregulation. The paradox for me is that the message that I'm communicating does not resonate well with the person that is dysregulated in a state where they want to listen to the Rachel Maddows of the world or the Tucker Carlsons of the world. That is a completely different state of mind. They want to be told that everything is binary. There's a right and there's a wrong. They think that clever equates to contrarian, taking a position that's counter to a popular culture position, a socially accepted position. But really, they're just looking at any issue and taking an opposite side. They're not really coming up with anything controversial about any of those issues. At best, they're peddling in conspiracy theories. In thinking about the presentation of this segment of the podcast, it struck me, it just came through me, Tommy Boy. Chris Farley and David Spade have their fight outside of the dinosaur park. They go into the diner. Farley's character Tommy wants chicken wings, but the fryers aren't on. I'm right there with you, Tommy. Cue the soliloquy.
Let me tell you why I suck as a
Podcaster.
Let's say I go into some guy's office. Let's say he's even remotely interested in...
Listening.
Well, then I get all excited. I'm like, JoJo, the idiot circus boy with a pretty new pet. The pet is my possible...
Podcast listener.
Oh, my pretty little pet. I love you. So I stroke it, and I pet it, and I massage it. Yeah, I love it. I love my little naughty pet. You're naughty. And then I take my naughty pet and I go. Oh! I killed it! I killed my...
Increased audience.
That's when I blow it. That's when people like us have got to forge ahead, Helen. Am I right?
And forge ahead I shall. We can all relate. We've all tried to convince someone of something at one point in our lives. And the angrier we got, the more frustrated we became. The more frustrated we were with the other person's resistance. Did it ever work? Did it ever help convince the other person of your brilliance, of your aptitude, of the wisdom of your insights? Of course not. The other party gets more and more entrenched in their position, in their views. Your dysregulation that you likely see as passion, that you likely see as purpose, your dysregulation becomes their dysregulation. You begin to actually give off that vibration and they begin to absorb it. They move towards you. Let me say that again. They actually move towards you. In your mind's eye, you see them being more resistant. You see them being more entrenched in their position. You see them moving away from you. But the reality is they're moving closer to you. They're moving towards you. They are now in the same vibration that you are, which is dysregulation. See the paradox? You become more passionate. You think that they're becoming more stubborn. The fact of the matter is, you're not becoming more passionate. I was not passionate about many of the topics that I was discussing last season on the podcast. The more that I discussed it, the more I got into a state of dysregulation, the more I came off as a know-it-all prick. Now, I've got know-it-all prick down pretty well. I can do that. That part of me, the me's, right? We all wear many hats every day. We're all a bunch of different personalities, all in the same ego, all in the same body, all in the same day. I got that one down pretty good, the know-it-all prick one. It's funny, though, the know-it-all prick one routinely gets frustrated meeting and having to deal with, having to manage a bunch of other know-it-all pricks. How did I come to be a lawyer in the first place? Do you see it, dear listener? It all makes sense. It's all like a large, long, complicated equation. And yet when you take a step back from it, it's just 2 plus 2 equals 4. It all makes sense. So if I want to grow the podcast, if I want to have a wider audience, do I need to learn some algorithm trick on Facebook or on Instagram? Do I need to have more frequent posts on Twitter? Do I have to spend money with any of these social media platforms? Do I have to create a YouTube channel? Maybe. Maybe all of those things are necessary. But the other maybe is maybe I need to be a less dysregulated ass because the message that I'm conveying is inconsistent with the population of dysregulated asses. I'm not trying to start another hamburger joint. You know what you're going to get when you go to McDonald's. You know what you're going to get when you go to Burger King. You know what you get when you actually, and I don't know why you would, when you go to Jack in the Box. In-N-Out's a little better. Five Guys has a reputation. You go into some of the nicer restaurants, they have their burgers as well. You know what you're going to get. And people go there. They know what they want, and they go there to get it. They're not going to be surprised. They're not going to be challenged. You tune in to MSNBC, you know what you're going to get. Rachel Maddow is going to say what you want to hear. You tune into Fox News, you know what you're going to get. Tucker Carlson is going to tell you what you want to hear. That's not my audience. That's not my message. That's not what I want to do. If this is going to be anything more than just me blathering into a microphone once a week for the benefit of 10 or 20 people that I know, I have to not only be more authentic, but I have to get out of this state of dysregulation. My dysregulated state and the message that I'm communicating are completely incongruent. If Rachel Maddow gets on her next broadcast and says all of her listeners should go out and vote for Republicans simply to turn over all of these offices, and then in the next election cycle they can go out and vote for Democrats and then vote for Republicans again just to send a message, how many viewers are going to stick by her? Let's be even more clear. How many advertisers are going to stick by her when those viewers walk away? How many advertisers are going to stick by her when her message often contradicts the very message that those advertisers are conveying to this captive audience? Her audience comes for some Burger King. She's got a lot of money in her pocket. There's a lot of money in serving Burger King to those coming in for a flamed broiled Whopper. But it's also a trap. She's also trapped by the fact that she can't serve anything but a flamed broiled Whopper. Because the second she tries to step out, she loses the audience, which means she loses the advertisers, which means she loses the money. If I'm preaching a message whereby I know that I'm not going to get the kind of money that comes with serving the flamed broiled Whopper, I actually have to serve it in a different capacity. That's not only my test in this podcast, that's the test in my life. To notice, to be aware when I am confusing passion or purpose with dysregulation. In that way, this podcast is really an open letter to myself, where I am memorializing my growth, or lack thereof, from a state of regulation or dysregulation. And consistent with the theme of this very segment, Tommy Boy coming through in the end of the movie, triumphantly making strides, closing sales, and saving the brake factory, I too am confident that it's all going to work out well for me in the end. And if it doesn't, I do have the law to fall back on, and well, they enjoy them a know-it-all prick. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.